My husband said, I'm taking the dog, you get the kid. His mom laughed, at least the dog's trained. On court day, my son walked to the judge and said, Mom, can I read what Dad texted me last night? The judge raised an eyebrow. His lawyer turned pale. The courtroom fell silent. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the living room curtains, casting long golden rays across the worn wooden floor. Emily Carter sat at the edge of the couch, a stack of student essays resting untouched on her lap. Her gaze drifted toward the kitchen, where her husband, Jason, was rinsing a coffee mug under the tap with a silence that had become familiar. The clinking of porcelain and water was the only sound between them, and even that seemed heavy. Max, their golden retriever, lay sprawled near the back door, his ears twitching now and then, eyes following Emily's every movement. It had been several months since the first honest conversation about separation. Not one dramatic argument, not one single explosive moment, just a slow, steady unraveling of shared routines and unspoken expectations. Their words were careful, always chosen with civility, especially in front of Noah. He was 9 years old now, thoughtful, bright, and always watching. Emily often wondered how much he understood, how much he was pretending not to notice. Jason turned off the tap and dried the mug with the dish towel, then looked over his shoulder. I was thinking, he said, his tone neutral. Maybe I should start looking for a place closer to the office. Somewhere that'll let me have Max. Emily nodded, though a slight tension pulled at her shoulders. You've always loved walking him in the mornings. Jason gave a small laugh. Yeah. You stay with Noah. That makes sense. I'll take the dog. From the corner of the room, a voice cut through the air, not Emily's, not Jason's, but light and amused. Oh, how fair, came the chuckle of Beverly, Jason's mother, who had been folding laundry in the adjacent room. You keep the kid, and he keeps the dog. Jason smirked, not unkindly. Emily didn't laugh. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, where a faint creak on the floorboard made her stomach sink. Noah had been reading in his room. Or at least, that's what she thought. She stood quickly, excusing herself with a polite smile and walked toward his door. It was slightly ajar. Noah was seated cross-legged on the floor, his back against the bed frame, a book lying open but forgotten on his knees. Max had followed her, nosing the door open just enough to poke his head in. Emily knelt beside her son. Hey, she said softly. Everything okay? Noah glanced up at her, then at the dog behind her. Yeah, he mumbled. She didn't press. Instead, she reached over and closed the book gently. Come on. Let's get dinner started. That evening, the table was quiet. Jason ate quickly, offering a few comments about his day that barely skimmed the surface. Emily tried to carry the conversation, asking Noah about school, about the science project he had been excited about the week before. But his answers were short. Between bites of mashed potatoes, he only seemed to look at Max, who sat loyally beneath the table, his head resting against Noah's knee. After dinner, Jason announced he had some paperwork to finish. He kissed Noah's head and gave Emily a polite nod before disappearing into what used to be the guest room, now his office. Emily began clearing the plates. She watched as Noah wandered into the living room, sat on the rug, and began drawing quietly with his colored pencils. She came to sit beside him, folding her legs and leaning her head slightly to peek at his sketch. A house, 2 stick figures, one tall, one smaller, and a dog between them. He didn't use words, just lines and colors. But the silence in the image said enough. Do you want some tea? She asked gently, trying to offer normalcy. Noah shrugged. Can Max come with me if I sleep at Dad's house sometimes? Emily paused, her breath catching just slightly before she responded. We'll figure out a way, sweetheart. We always do. Later that night, after the dishes were clean and Noah was tucked in bed, Emily sat in the living room with Max curled up at her feet. The words kept echoing in her head. You stay with Noah. I'll take the dog. Said so simply, so lightly, yet it hung in the air like a final punctuation mark. She didn't believe Jason meant harm. Maybe it was just an attempt at dividing responsibilities, making sense of the inevitable. But still, there had been something unsettling about the way it was said, and more so, about the way Noah had heard it. Upstairs, the quiet hum of the baby monitor, kept more out of habit now than necessity, carried a small sound. Not words, not crying, just the gentle shifting of a child in thought, a child drifting into sleep beside a loyal dog who didn't yet know his future was being discussed. And so the night fell on a house that was no longer whole, but still trying, gently, silently, to hold itself together for just a little longer. The morning sun came gently through the blinds of Noah's room, brushing the corners of his desk and illuminating the scattered colored pencils left from the night before. Emily stood at the doorway, holding a folded sweater in one hand and watching her son tie his sneakers in slow, almost robotic movements. He hadn't said much since waking up. Normally, mornings were filled with questions about the day ahead, requests for cereal, or small jokes between bites of toast. Today, silence filled the space instead. Downstairs, Max paced near the front door, tail wagging in short bursts as if trying to compensate for the tension that lingered in the air. Emily tried not to overthink, tried to treat it like any other school day. But she had seen the expression on Noah's face when he glanced at Max that morning, a quiet confusion, not quite sadness, not quite anger, just something unresolved. The ride to school was short, but the silence stretched between them like an invisible thread. Emily drove with one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting the heater that Noah normally liked a little warmer. Today, he didn't mention it. At the stoplight before turning into the school zone, Noah finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. "If Daddy keeps Max, can I still call him every day?" Emily blinked, not sure at first if she had heard correctly. She glanced sideways at her son, whose eyes were fixed on the passing cars. "You mean, call Max?" He nodded slowly. "Of course you can," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "But we haven't decided anything like that yet, Noah. We'll make sure you still get to spend time with Max, no matter what." Noah didn't answer. He simply reached into his backpack and pulled out the small notebook where he kept his drawings, hugging it close to his chest. Emily's heart clenched. She parked in the school's drop-off zone and turned to face him more directly. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay to talk about these things, you know. If anything's bothering you, you can always tell me." Noah hesitated, then nodded again, though his lips stayed closed. He leaned over, kissed her cheek, and slipped out of the car. Emily watched him walk toward the school entrance, his small figure dwarfed by the towering red brick building. Just before he entered, he turned and looked back, not at her, but toward the car, as if hoping Max had come along that morning. Then he disappeared through the doors. Emily stayed there a moment longer than usual, her fingers resting on the steering wheel, her eyes focused on the spot where her son had just stood. Something had shifted. She could feel it, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably present. Back at home, Jason was already in the kitchen, flipping through his tablet and sipping coffee. He barely looked up when Emily entered. She fed Max, answered a few emails, and then joined him with a mug of tea in hand. "I think Noah's more affected than he's letting on," she said casually, watching Jason's expression. He nodded but didn't look up. "He's a kid. He'll adapt." Emily frowned slightly. He asked if he could call Max every day. Now Jason looked up, surprised. "Really? He thought if you keep Max, maybe he won't get to see him as much." Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Well, I mean, he'll see him on weekends, right? When he's with me." Emily hesitated. "That might not be enough for him." Jason sighed, rubbing his face. "Emily, I'm already giving you the house. The routine's going to change. We can't keep everything exactly the same." "I'm not saying it has to be," she replied evenly. "I'm just saying we need to think carefully about what Noah needs. He's not just adjusting to a new living arrangement, he's also losing little constants. Like Max being there when he wakes up, or at bedtime." Jason didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood and poured himself another cup of coffee. Emily watched his back, the way his shoulders moved stiffly, the way he didn't turn around when he spoke next. "You think I'm being selfish?" "No," she said gently. "I think we're both trying to hold on to what makes us feel less alone." That made him turn. He met her eyes and, for a moment, there was a flash of the man she had married, conflicted, yes, but still capable of understanding. He sighed. "I'll think about it," he said. Later that afternoon, Emily picked Noah up from school. His teacher, Ms. Dunley, waved at her near the gate. "Just a quick note," she said with a polite smile. Noah seemed a little distracted during class. "Nothing serious, but, if there's anything going on at home that we should be aware of, feel free to reach out." Emily nodded, heart sinking slightly. "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." In the car, Noah was still quiet, but this time he clutched his drawing notebook a little tighter. At home, Max greeted them enthusiastically, and Emily saw something shift in Noah's demeanor the moment the dog leapt into his arms. The boy laughed, a real laugh, and Max licked his face excitedly. It was the first moment of ease all day. They spent the late afternoon in the living room. Emily let Noah pick a movie, an animated one they had seen a dozen times, and curled up beside him on the couch. Max nestled at their feet. It was the kind of ordinary moment that now felt rare. As the movie ended and the credits rolled, Noah turned to her. "What if Max doesn't remember me later? If I don't see him for a long time?" Emily brushed his hair gently. "Sweetheart, dogs don't forget the people they love. Especially not Max." He thought for a moment, then opened his notebook. "Can I draw him every day? Even if I'm not with him?" "Of course," she said. Jason came downstairs not long after, noticing the sketch Noah was working on. He sat nearby, not saying much. Emily watched him carefully. He didn't smile, but he didn't interrupt either. After dinner, as Noah was getting ready for bed, Jason pulled Emily aside. "About Max," he said quietly. "Maybe we should talk to someone. Like a mediator or someone who can help us make a schedule that includes the dog too. For Noah's sake." Emily studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "It's a start," she said. That night, she tucked Noah in, and as she leaned down to kiss his forehead, he whispered, "I think Max should have two homes too." Emily smiled, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We'll see what we can do." The lights dimmed. Max curled up at the foot of the bed, and the house, while still shifting in its foundations, felt, just for a moment, steady. The morning Jason moved out was quieter than expected. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no last-minute arguments. The movers arrived shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning, their van humming softly in the driveway. Emily had prepared Noah in advance, telling him that Dad would be living in a different house soon, but that nothing about their love for him, or Max, would change. Still, as the boxes were carried out one by one, Noah lingered near the window, his eyes following each trip like he was counting the pieces of his life being redistributed. Emily had tried to make the day feel normal. She made waffles for breakfast, added extra blueberries the way Noah liked, and kept Max close. Jason greeted them with a short smile and a tired morning, but most of his energy was focused on organizing what needed to be taken. He had packed in stages during the previous week, but there were always last-minute decisions, whether to bring the old armchair from the study, whether to leave behind the collection of mugs he never used but had refused to throw out. Noah sat at the table pushing pieces of waffle around on his plate, barely eating. Max rested his head on the boy's lap, sensing something different in the air. "Do you want to help me carry a box?" Jason asked, stepping into the kitchen with a small cardboard container under his arm. Noah looked up, his voice barely audible. "Which one?" Jason smiled gently. "It's just books. From my shelf. Nothing heavy." The boy hesitated, then stood. Max followed him, tail low, ears alert. Together, they walked out to the van, where Jason handed Noah the lightest box. The movers greeted him kindly, one even giving him a small high five as he passed. Emily watched from the porch, coffee in hand, trying to remain steady, to absorb the moment for what it was, a shift, not a rupture. Later, after the last item had been loaded, Jason came back into the house, this time holding a small envelope. He knelt beside Noah, who was seated on the living room floor with Max, drawing. "I made you something," Jason said, offering the envelope. "You don't have to open it now. Just, maybe when you miss me. Or when things feel strange." Noah took it without a word, turning it over in his hands. There was no name written on the front, just a simple sticker of a paw print in the corner. Max nuzzled into Jason's side, and for a brief second, Jason closed his eyes and let his hand rest on the dog's head. Emily kept a respectful distance, giving them space. She wasn't sure what Jason had written or drawn or placed inside, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was trying, in his own way, to remain present in Noah's life even from a new address. When Jason stood to leave, the moment stretched uncomfortably. He turned to Emily, gave a short nod, and then opened the front door. Noah remained still, his drawing forgotten on the floor. Max whimpered softly but didn't move. Jason hesitated. "I'll come by Friday to pick Noah up for the weekend. If that still works." Emily nodded. "Of course. We'll have his bag ready." He looked at Noah once more, then stepped outside. The door clicked softly behind him. The house felt hollow after that, not empty exactly, but missing a familiar rhythm. Max wandered from room to room, sniffing at corners, occasionally barking once, sharply, then going quiet again. Emily knew dogs had their own way of understanding absence. She watched as Max circled Jason's old spot in the living room and finally settled down with a heavy sigh. That afternoon, Emily decided it was time to start building a new kind of routine, not just for Noah, but for herself too. She had always been the one holding the family together with soft words and structured days, and now that role took on a sharper clarity. She went into Noah's room with a folded pile of laundry, expecting to find him drawing or building something with his blocks, but instead, he was lying on the bed with the envelope on his chest, unopened. "Want to talk about it?" she asked gently, setting the clothes on his dresser. Noah shook his head. "Not yet." She sat beside him. "That's okay. You don't have to open it today." Noah finally looked at her. "I think Dad's going to miss Max more than he'll miss me." Emily's breath caught. "Why would you think that? He didn't say anything about missing me. But he asked to take Max." Emily placed her hand on his. "Your dad loves you, Noah. He's just not always good at saying what he feels." Noah didn't reply. He turned his gaze back to the ceiling and stayed that way for a while, lost in thought. Eventually, Max wandered in and climbed up onto the bed without invitation, settling between them. Emily smiled, grateful for the dog's intuition. That evening, as they were finishing dinner, Noah asked a question that caught Emily off guard. "What's Dad's new house like?" She put down her fork. "I haven't seen it. But I'm sure it's nice. Maybe you can help decorate your room there this weekend." Noah brightened a little at that. "Can I bring my drawings?" "Of course. You can bring whatever makes it feel like home." "Even Max?" Emily hesitated. "Max will stay here during the week, remember? But maybe we can talk to your dad about visits." He nodded slowly, then added, "I think Max should have sleepovers too." The rest of the week passed with small adjustments. Emily reorganized the living room to make space feel different, not necessarily better, just changed. She moved a few pieces of furniture, brought in a plant from the kitchen, and let Noah help rearrange the photos on the wall. It was their way of marking the beginning of something new without erasing what had come before. Friday arrived with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Jason pulled into the driveway right on time. He stepped out of the car with a cautious smile and opened the back door to show Noah the new booster seat he had installed. Max barked once, then ran to the window, tail wagging. Noah came downstairs with his backpack already slung over one shoulder and his drawing notebook tucked under one arm. You sure you've got everything? Emily asked, kneeling beside him to zip up his coat. Yeah. I packed my pajamas and my toothbrush. And some snacks. He paused. Do I say goodbye to Max? Emily didn't answer right away. She opened the door and let Max trot over. The dog sniffed at Noah's feet, then licked his hand. Maybe you can take a picture of him while you're at Dad's, she said. So you can show Max where you've been. Noah smiled faintly. Good idea. Jason stepped forward, holding the car door open. Ready, buddy? Noah gave Max one last pat on the head, then climbed into the car. Emily waved from the porch, her heart heavy but proud of the calm she had managed to maintain. As the car pulled away, Max let out a single bark, then sat down by the door, as if waiting for someone who would be back soon. And in that stillness, Emily understood, this was not the end of something. It was the reshaping of everything they knew, guided by love, patience, and the hope that what came next would be steady enough for them all. Friday night came with an unsettling stillness. The kind of quiet that filled the corners of the house too quickly. Emily moved through the rooms with deliberate calm, trying not to check her phone too often, resisting the urge to text Jason and ask how things were going. She knew she had to trust the process, trust that Noah was okay, that the hours apart would help both of them settle into this new rhythm. But the silence clung to her shoulders like a weight she couldn't shrug off. Max was restless. He walked from room to room, tail low, nose pressed against doors, pausing at the foot of the stairs before padding back toward the living room where Emily sat pretending to read. He whined occasionally, ears twitching at every sound outside. When she finally got up to check the front porch, Max followed eagerly, as if he, too, had been holding out hope that the car might reappear, that Noah might return sooner than expected. But the street was empty, the sky beginning to darken, and there was no sound except the wind rustling the tree branches. Emily tried to distract herself with simple tasks. She tidied the kitchen, reorganized a drawer that had been long overdue, watered the plants, and then set out Max's dinner. He sniffed at the bowl and backed away, walking to the hallway and lying down where Noah's backpack usually rested. She left the food untouched, knowing he'd eat when he felt ready. It wasn't until Saturday morning that the quiet began to feel unbearable. She poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table, her phone beside her like an anchor. At 8:10, she finally gave in and texted Jason. Just checking in. Everything okay? The reply came quickly, almost too quickly. Yeah, we're good. He's still sleeping. Long night of movies and popcorn. She smiled at the message, then typed a quick response. Glad to hear. Tell him Max misses him. There was no reply after that, which she decided to take as a good sign. If things were bad, Jason would have said something. Silence meant peace, or at least, manageable chaos. By mid-morning, Emily decided to take Max for a longer walk. The fall air was crisp, and the sidewalks were littered with leaves. Max perked up slightly when she grabbed the leash, but he still looked back toward the house as they stepped outside. As they passed the elementary school, Emily thought of Noah playing in the yard, waiting in line at lunch, raising his hand in class. She tried to imagine him now, maybe watching cartoons with Jason or eating breakfast on the couch. She knew weekends would be harder in the beginning. During the week, there was school, homework, schedules. Distraction. But weekends were for the small rituals that made a family feel whole. Pancakes on Saturday, movie night on Sunday, bath time arguments and last-minute projects. Those were the moments that would sting the most in absence. When they returned home, Emily found herself hovering in the hallway outside Noah's room. She pushed the door open slowly, as if expecting to find him there despite knowing he wasn't. The room looked untouched. His favorite blanket was folded neatly at the end of the bed, and a stuffed dinosaur sat propped up on the pillow. On the desk, his drawing notebook was gone, taken with him to Jason's, as planned. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the soft give of the mattress beneath her. Max jumped up beside her, curling close. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The hours passed slowly. she tried not to let her mind spiral. Instead, she cleaned the bathroom, rearranged the pantry, and then finally surrendered to the urge to cook something elaborate, something that would take up time and space. By late afternoon, the smell of roasted vegetables and seasoned chicken filled the kitchen. She set the table for one and gave Max a small piece of cooked carrot, which he accepted, but without much enthusiasm. Later that evening, her phone buzzed again. It was a picture. Noah, sitting cross-legged on a rug in a new room with pale blue walls, smiling with a juice box in hand. On the bed behind him, his drawing notebook was open to a page showing Max sitting between two houses, both drawn with small hearts above the roofs. Underneath the image, Jason had written, "He says Max should spend Mondays with Mom and Fridays with Dad." Just a suggestion. Emily stared at the photo for a long time, her eyes stinging, not from sadness, but from the sudden warmth that settled in her chest. She typed back a quick message. "That's a fair suggestion. Tell him I love the drawing." The next morning, Emily woke up early. She made pancakes, even though she would be the only one eating them. Max sat patiently at her feet, tail thumping occasionally. After breakfast, she packed a small lunch and decided to take him to the park. The sun was out, and the leaves had begun to change in earnest, rich shades of gold, orange, and red blanketing the walking paths. At the park, Max seemed lighter. He chased a few squirrels, barked at a passing jogger, and even rolled in a pile of leaves. Emily laughed out loud, the sound catching her by surprise. It felt good, simple and spontaneous. She sat on a bench for a while, watching children run between trees, their parents trailing behind with coffees and strollers. She wondered if Jason had taken Noah to a park that morning too, if they had sat on a bench like this, if Noah had told Jason about his week, his schoolwork, the spelling test he had been nervous about. It was strange, not knowing what had filled her son's Saturday. Not knowing which moments she had missed. But this was what they had chosen. A peaceful separation. A shared responsibility. Love split into separate spaces. Sunday evening, Jason pulled into the driveway just after 6 o'clock. Emily opened the door before they rang the bell, Max at her side, tail wagging furiously. Noah stepped out of the car with his drawing notebook still in his hand and a backpack over one shoulder. He crouched down immediately to hug Max, who barked excitedly and licked his face. "Missed you, buddy," Noah whispered, burying his face in the dog's fur. Emily stood in the doorway, watching. Jason gave her a polite nod and carried the backpack inside. "Everything go okay?" she asked. Jason nodded. "Yeah. He was great. Ate more popcorn than I thought possible." Emily smiled. "I'll make him a salad to balance it out." Noah finally looked up, eyes bright. "Mom, I drew more stuff. I'll show you after dinner." "Looking forward to it," she said. Jason stood by the door, hesitating. "I'll pick him up again next Friday? Same time?" "Yeah. Unless something comes up." "Got it." They exchanged a brief glance, one of cautious respect, then Jason turned to leave. As the car pulled away, Noah sat on the floor of the living room with Max, flipping through his notebook. Emily didn't ask for details. She didn't push. She simply sat beside him, waiting for whatever he wanted to share. He turned the page and pointed. "This is me and Dad watching a movie. And this one is Max's Friday house. I'm still working on his Monday house." Emily smiled. "I can't wait to see it." And in that quiet, as Max rested his head on Noah's knee and the house filled once again with the soft sounds of routine, Emily felt the first true sense of possibility. They were learning how to live apart without falling apart. One drawing, one visit, one weekend at a time. The week after Noah's first weekend with Jason began with an unexpected calm. Emily had anticipated some resistance, maybe tears at bedtime, reluctance to go to school, or even a change in appetite, but none of that came. Instead, Noah eased back into their shared rhythm as though the separation had been a long weekend at a cousin's house. He did his homework at the kitchen table, played with Max in the afternoons, and helped Emily prepare dinner on Tuesday evening without being asked. Still, Emily remained observant. She had learned that children often express their feelings not with words, but through small changes, a delay in answering a question, a sudden quietness, the way they looked at familiar things. On Wednesday afternoon, while folding laundry, she found herself staring at one of Noah's shirts, a red one with faded letters that he used to insist on wearing every Friday. He hadn't worn it since Jason moved out. She folded it carefully and placed it on top of the stack without a word. That night, after dinner and a short walk around the block with Max, Emily noticed Noah sitting on the back porch, his legs crossed, notebook open in his lap. Max lay beside him, head on his paws, watching fireflies drift lazily through the warm evening air. Emily stepped outside with 2 glasses of lemonade, offering one to Noah as she sat beside him. He accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you," and took a slow sip before returning his gaze to the page. "What ya working on?" she asked, her voice casual. Noah shrugged. "Just drawing." She didn't press. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and neighborhood chatter. Then, Noah spoke. "Do you think Max feels weird going back and forth?" Emily turned slightly to face him. "Maybe a little. But I think he's happy to be with you no matter where you are." Noah nodded, his pencil moving across the paper. "I tried drawing him with a suitcase, but it looked silly." Emily smiled. "I don't think it's silly. It actually makes a lot of sense." He paused, then glanced at her. "Do you think it's weird for me?" She set her lemonade down. "I think it's a big change. And it's okay if it feels weird sometimes. Do you want to talk about it?" Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he pointed at a page in his notebook. "I drew this at Dad's. It's me, Max, and Dad watching a movie. But I didn't know how to draw the part where I missed you." Emily looked at the sketch. It was simple, 3 figures on a couch, a bowl of popcorn in the middle, the television showing a cartoon spaceship. She noticed there was an empty chair drawn in the corner of the room. "I think you already did," she said softly, pointing to the chair. Noah looked surprised. "You think that's me missing you?" She nodded. "Sometimes, what we leave out says just as much as what we draw." He stared at the page for a while, then closed the notebook and hugged it to his chest. "I didn't want to tell Dad I missed you. I thought maybe it would make him sad." Emily took a breath, steady and warm. "You don't have to choose who you miss, sweetheart. Missing one person doesn't mean you love the other any less." Noah looked down. "He said we're gonna build a bookshelf together next weekend. For my drawings." "That sounds like a great idea," she replied. "I want to have one here too. One that looks the same. So it feels like they're both connected." Emily's throat tightened. "Then we'll build one here. Maybe even let Max help us pick the color." Noah smiled, a small, quiet smile. Then he leaned against her shoulder, and they sat like that until the sun fully disappeared and the sky turned indigo. Max eventually got up, stretching before trotting back inside, as if signaling that it was time to settle in for the night. The next afternoon, Emily picked Noah up from school a few minutes early. She had scheduled a surprise, nothing extravagant, just a small outing to the local hardware store, where they could browse paint samples and shelf designs. As they walked through the aisles, Noah grew more animated, asking questions about tools, wood types, and whether they could paint his shelf green and blue, like a forest sky. Emily made mental notes of everything, watching how much more expressive he became when given the opportunity to shape his world. Back at home, they laid out the materials on the dining room table. While Emily made dinner, Noah began sketching plans for how the shelf would look. He labeled sections, even adding little drawings of where Max's picture might go. For the first time in days, he was talking about the future with clarity and confidence. That evening, after dinner, Emily sat beside him again, this time in his room. He had just finished brushing his teeth and was getting into bed when he looked at her seriously. "Can I ask you something kind of weird?" "Always," she said. "If the judge asks me stuff later, like about who I want to live with, what do I say?" Emily paused. This wasn't a question she had expected so soon, but it didn't surprise her either. She knew the custody hearing would come eventually, and though she and Jason had agreed to make it as smooth as possible, the presence of a judge added a layer of formality that felt heavy, even to a child. "Well," she began, choosing her words carefully, "you don't have to choose one person over the other. The judge just wants to understand how you feel, what's important to you. Things like what makes you feel safe and happy." Noah considered that. "So I can say I like having 2 houses? And that Max should too?" Emily smiled. "Yes, you can say that. You can say anything that's true for you." He nodded slowly. "I just want it to be fair." "I know you do. And I think it will be." Noah pulled the blanket up to his chin. "Do you think Max gets scared when I'm not with him?" "I think he's okay, because he knows you'll come back. Just like you know he'll be here waiting." That seemed to settle something in Noah's mind. He reached over, pulled his notebook from the bedside table, and began to sketch one last thing before bed. Emily stood and turned off the light, leaving only the soft glow of his night lamp on. As she closed the door gently behind her, she caught a glimpse of his newest drawing, Max, lying in the middle of a room, 2 identical bookshelves on either side, each filled with colorful pages and tiny hand-drawn memories. And in that moment, Emily understood that her son wasn't just adapting, he was actively shaping the narrative of his life, creating bridges instead of barriers, drawing connections where others might see division. He wasn't afraid of change. He was learning how to live in it, with quiet courage and the steady hand of a child who still believed in home. The envelope from the county court arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked among grocery flyers and bills. Emily recognized it instantly, not by any special marking on the paper, but by the weight it seemed to carry before she even opened it. She stood in the doorway for a long moment after retrieving the mail, fingers tracing the crease in the envelope, her breath slow and deliberate. Max waited by her side, as if sensing the pause in her step was not just about paper. Inside the kitchen, she opened it carefully. A single page, printed in formal language, stated the date and time of the custody hearing. It was official now. What had been conversations and intentions, temporary arrangements and gentle negotiations, was now entering a new phase. There would be structure. Legal recognition. A moment when someone outside their family would help determine how their family would function moving forward. Emily placed the letter on the counter and stared at it. Then she made herself a cup of tea and sat down in silence. That evening, after Noah was in bed, she called Jason. "The letter came today," she said. "I got mine too," Jason replied. "So it's happening. 3 weeks from now." There was a pause on the line. Then Jason spoke again, his tone less guarded than usual. "I want it to go smoothly, Em. I don't want to fight." "I don't either. But I think we need to be ready." "Agreed. I'll talk to my lawyer. Maybe we can draft a preliminary agreement before we get there." "Good idea," she said. "I'll do the same." They didn't say anything else for a moment. Then Jason added, almost hesitantly, "How's Noah been this week?" "Good. He's been calm. Focused." He asked about the judge. "What did you tell him?" "That he didn't have to pick sides. That he could talk about what makes him feel safe. And happy." Jason exhaled audibly. "He's handling this better than I thought he would." "He's trying," Emily said. "We all are." The next morning, she contacted a family lawyer she had been referred to by a colleague. Her name was Karen Stokes, experienced, direct, but also warm in a way that immediately put Emily at ease. They scheduled a meeting for the following Monday. Emily made a list of everything she wanted to discuss: custody schedules, communication agreements, holidays, financial contributions, and Max. When Monday arrived, she met Karen at her small downtown office. The walls were lined with certificates and framed photographs of children playing in parks or holding pets. Karen welcomed her with a handshake and listened intently as Emily explained the current arrangement. "We've been splitting weekends, more or less. Noah stays with Jason Friday through Sunday, and I have him during the week. Jason has Max now, but we're trying to arrange shared visits. Karen took notes. And how has your son responded to the current setup? He's doing okay. He's drawing a lot. Talking more. He suggested Max should have 2 homes, like him. Karen smiled gently. Children often understand fairness in ways adults struggle to articulate. They spent the next hour drafting a list of priorities, what Emily hoped the judge would consider, where she was flexible, where she stood firm. They also discussed the possibility of Noah expressing his thoughts to the court, if appropriate. He mentioned wanting to talk to the judge, Emily said. Not to choose. Just to explain how he feels. Karen nodded. That's possible, depending on the judge's discretion. I'll request a child interview. But remember, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation. The goal is to hear his voice without putting him in the middle. Emily left the office feeling both reassured and emotionally spent. The process was real now, not a future concern but an active step forward. She picked Noah up from school that afternoon and took him to the small bookstore near their house. He picked out a graphic novel and a new set of colored pencils. On the walk home, he asked quietly, "Did you go see the judge today?" "Not yet," Emily said. "But I talked to someone who's helping us get ready." "Am I gonna go too?" "Only if you want to. No one's going to make you say anything you're not comfortable with." Noah nodded. "I want to tell them I like both houses. And Max too." She smiled. That's exactly the kind of thing they should hear. At home, she helped him set up his new pencils at the desk. He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a blank page. Then he drew a set of scales, not the kind with numbers, but the kind Lady Justice holds. On one side, he placed a house with her and Max in it. On the other, a house with Jason and Max again. And at the bottom, he drew himself holding the string that balanced the beam. Emily watched in silence. He wasn't confused. He wasn't torn. He was simply trying to keep things even. Over the next week, preparations continued. Emily and Jason exchanged emails, mediated through their lawyers, about visitation schedules, school pickups, holidays, and even Max's routines. There were compromises. Jason would take Noah for alternating weekends and every other holiday. Emily would remain the primary weekday caregiver. Max would spend Monday through Thursday with Emily and Friday through Sunday with Jason, matching Noah's own schedule. They agreed to revisit the arrangement after 6 months. One evening, as they reviewed the final version of the proposed agreement, Emily invited Jason over, not for negotiation, but for inclusion. She had something she wanted him to see. When Jason arrived, Noah was in his room, music playing softly. Emily handed Jason a copy of the drawing, Noah's Scales of Balance. "He drew this after I explained what court might be like." Jason stared at the page for a long time. "That's better than anything I've come up with. He understands more than we think." Jason looked around the living room, his eyes pausing on Max, who lay near the fireplace, snoring gently. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. "And I think we're doing okay, all things considered." Emily nodded. "I think so too." Before Jason left, Noah came out to say goodnight. He handed his dad a folded piece of paper. "This is for the judge," he said. "In case they ask." Jason unfolded it slowly. Inside was a drawing of Max lying between 2 doors, both slightly open, with the words, "Home is where Max is. And I'm there too." Jason's eyes watered slightly. "You think they'll understand this?" Emily answered before he could. "If they don't, they shouldn't be making the decision." They stood in the doorway as Jason left. Noah leaned against her side, arms crossed loosely, face calm. "I don't feel scared about court anymore," he said. "You don't have to. We're doing this together." And in the quiet that followed, with Max stretching lazily across the rug and the night settling in, Emily felt something unexpected, not fear, not dread, but readiness. For whatever came next. The courtroom was quieter than Emily had imagined. There was no dramatic air, no gavel echoing in the silence, only the subdued murmur of paperwork being shuffled, the clack of a keyboard, the distant hum of hallway conversations beyond the door. Emily sat at the edge of a cushioned bench, Karen beside her, both watching the proceedings begin with a formality that felt detached from the emotional weight carried into the room. Jason arrived 10 minutes before the scheduled time. He greeted Emily with a nod, avoiding small talk, his lawyer following close behind. The judge had not yet entered, but the tension had. It settled over the benches, between every glance and every unspoken word. Emily shifted slightly, looking down at the folder on her lap, inside which lay the proposed agreement, photographs of Noah's routines, and a copy of the drawing he had made for the judge. Noah wasn't there yet. Earlier that morning, they had sat at the breakfast table in silence, the toast growing cold between them. Emily had offered him the choice once again. "You don't have to go, Noah. If you changed your mind, it's okay." He looked up, calm but sure. "I want to talk to them. Just for a little bit." She hadn't pushed further. She simply packed his notebook, his favorite blue hoodie, and the 2 drawings he had chosen to bring. Karen had arranged for Noah to speak with the judge privately in the chamber adjoining the main courtroom. It would be informal, guided, and brief, just enough to let the judge hear from the child without turning it into testimony. Now, as the judge entered and everyone stood, Emily felt a wave of unease tighten in her chest. She reminded herself to breathe. To stay present. The hearing began with standard procedures, names, roles, introductions. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with steady eyes and a calm voice, reviewed the preliminary documents aloud, confirming the proposal submitted by both parties. "So far, I see cooperation," the judge noted. "That's a very good sign." Karen stood to speak first, outlining Emily's position. Her tone was firm but measured, presenting the parenting plan they had worked on, emphasizing Noah's stability during the week, the benefits of consistency, and the respectful co-parenting structure already in place. Jason's lawyer echoed similar sentiments, highlighting Jason's commitment to maintaining a meaningful relationship with Noah and supporting his transitions. There was no objection, no conflict, no dispute. Everything, on paper, was functional. But then the judge looked up from her notes. "I understand the child has expressed interest in sharing his perspective?" Karen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Noah asked to speak with you. Not to take sides, he was very clear about that, but to share what he values in his current routine." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate the maturity. Let's give him that opportunity." A bailiff opened the side door, and a moment later, Noah appeared, small in the wide frame of the door, holding his drawing notebook like a shield. He looked first at Emily, who gave him a gentle smile, then at Jason, who gave him a small thumbs up. The judge stood and extended her hand. "Hi, Noah. I'm Judge Riley. Would you like to come talk with me for a bit?" Noah nodded and walked with her into the chamber. The door closed behind them, and silence returned to the courtroom. Emily held her breath. Inside the judge's chambers, the environment was much less formal. A soft armchair faced a low table with a small bowl of mints. Shelves of books lined the walls, and framed pictures of landscapes and smiling children softened the mood. Judge Riley gestured for Noah to sit. "You can call me Judge Riley, or just Riley. Whichever feels better." "I think I'll just say, Judge," Noah said, settling into the seat, his notebook balanced on his knees. "Fair enough," she replied with a smile. "So, your mom and dad told me you've been doing really well lately. And that you wanted to tell me about your family. Is that right?" Noah nodded. "I didn't want to choose between them. I just wanted to tell you what's been working. That's a very thoughtful reason to be here. I'm all ears." Noah opened his notebook. He flipped to a page with 2 houses drawn side by side. Between them stood Max, tail wagging. Noah pointed at the first house. "This is where I sleep during the week. I have school and homework and Max helps me wake up on time." Then he pointed to the second. This is Dad's house. I go there on weekends. We do movie night and pancakes. I like both houses. The judge leaned forward. What about Max? I see he's in both places. He has a schedule too, Noah said. He comes with me. Like a family pet passport. Judge Riley chuckled softly. A very organized one, it seems. Noah hesitated, then flipped to another drawing. This is the one I made for you. She looked at the picture. 2 bookshelves, one on each side of Max, with Noah sitting in the middle, drawing. Each shelf had the same number of books, colored in vibrant detail. I made 1 shelf at each house. So I can keep my drawings in both places. That's a lovely idea, the judge said. Do you feel happy living this way? Noah considered her question carefully. I feel balanced. It's not the same as before. But it feels fair. And Max is okay with it too. The judge smiled warmly. That's very helpful, Noah. Thank you for sharing all of this with me. You've made some very grown-up observations. Noah shrugged. I just don't want either of them to think I love them less. Judge Riley paused, then said quietly, You're not the only one who's felt that way in this room. They sat in silence for a moment before she reached for a small slip of paper. I'm going to write something for you. A little reminder. You don't have to keep it forever, but maybe it'll help. She scribbled a sentence, folded it, and handed it to him. Noah read it silently. It said, Being in the middle doesn't mean you're split, it means you're strong enough to hold both sides. He smiled and folded it again, tucking it into the back of his notebook. When they returned to the courtroom, Noah didn't look nervous anymore. He walked to Emily first, hugged her tightly, then did the same with Jason. After that, he sat quietly at the back, flipping through his drawings while the judge resumed her seat. Judge Riley looked over her glasses at both parents. I want to commend both of you for the tone and cooperation you've brought into this process. That's not common in my courtroom. What I heard from your son only reinforced what's already clear. He's being raised in an environment of respect and emotional safety. That should continue. Emily felt a deep release in her chest, the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding finally escaping. I see no need to make significant changes to the proposal submitted, the judge continued. But I would like to include a clause regarding Max's shared care, as it clearly holds emotional value for the child. We'll formalize a visitation schedule for Max as well. Jason's lawyer nodded. That's acceptable. Karen spoke next. We appreciate the court's recognition of that bond. And just like that, it was done. The judge finalized the agreement and offered one final look toward the back of the room, where Noah had drawn a tiny smiley face in the margin of one of his pages. Families don't always stay under one roof, she said. But love doesn't check addresses. With that, the gavel came down, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet symbol that what was needed had been heard, and what was fair had been decided. Outside the courtroom, Emily took Noah's hand as they walked to the car. Jason walked beside them, Max's visitation schedule now folded into the official packet under his arm. Noah squeezed Emily's fingers. I'm glad I talked. She looked down. So am I. And though the day had started with nerves and paper, it ended with something much stronger, clarity, balance, and the quiet confidence of a boy who had spoken not to choose, but to be understood. The night before the custody hearing had been an unexpectedly calm one. In retrospect, Emily would remember it not with anxiety or dread, but with a kind of delicate quiet, like the space between heartbeats when everything seems to hold still for just a moment longer than usual. At the time, it had felt like the pause before the leap, though she wasn't entirely sure who was leaping, or in which direction. It was a Wednesday, unusually warm for the season, with the last rays of late afternoon sunlight brushing golden streaks across the kitchen counter. Emily stood at the sink rinsing vegetables while Noah sat at the dining table flipping through his drawing notebook. Max lay stretched out under the table, his breathing slow and rhythmic, ears occasionally twitching in response to the small sounds of the house. Everything felt contained, like they had all silently agreed to keep things simple that evening. "I think I'm going to bring my green hoodie tomorrow," Noah said suddenly, without looking up. Emily glanced over her shoulder. "That's a good choice. It's comfortable. Are you sure you want to bring your notebook too?" He nodded. "It helps me explain things better. It's easier to draw what I feel than to say it sometimes." Emily dried her hands and walked over to sit beside him. "You've already done more than anyone expected. You don't have to do anything more than you feel ready for." Noah looked up at her then, his face serious but steady. "I'm not scared. Not like before. It's just, I want to show them that I get it. That I understand what's happening." She reached out and gently tucked a piece of hair behind his ear. "You've been incredibly brave, Noah. More than most grown-ups I know." He shrugged and flipped to a new page, starting to sketch without saying much more. Emily let him work, watching as his pencil traced the outline of a familiar shape: a living room couch, a dog curled in the corner, 2 bookshelves on opposite walls, and in the middle, a boy, sitting cross-legged, drawing. Above the drawing, he wrote a single sentence in blocky letters: "It doesn't matter where the walls are. It matters what's inside them." Later, after dinner, Emily helped him gather the things he wanted to bring. She laid out his clothes, checked his backpack, and placed his drawings in a protective folder. Noah asked if he could sleep in her room that night. It wasn't something he requested often, but when he did, Emily never said no. That night, they made a nest of pillows and blankets on her bed, Max climbing up at the foot without needing an invitation. "Do you think the judge will ask hard questions?" Noah asked, curled against her side. "I think she'll ask honest ones," Emily replied. "But she'll listen. And she'll care about what you say." Noah was quiet for a moment. "What if I forget what I want to say?" Emily reached over and tapped the folder on the nightstand. "Then you show her your drawings. They say everything you need to say." He seemed to like that answer. He turned on his side, pressing his back against her arm, and within minutes, his breathing slowed. Emily lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling, not out of worry but out of reflection. She thought about the last 6 months, how far they had come from the initial conversations, the tension that used to cling to every word exchanged with Jason, the fear of doing the wrong thing. None of it had been easy. But somehow, they had found a rhythm. Not a perfect one, not without occasional moments of awkwardness or uncertainty, but real. Sustainable. Human. In the quiet, she heard Noah stir and mumble something in his sleep. She leaned over, brushing her fingers gently along his forehead. Max shifted at the foot of the bed, his head lifting for a second before he settled again with a sigh. Emily closed her eyes. That night, she dreamed of their old house. Not as it had been, but as if it had been gently redrawn, walls in different places, rooms lit in new ways. Jason was there, but he wasn't distant. He was sitting at the dining table with Noah, assembling a bookshelf, laughing at something she couldn't hear. Max trotted between rooms, his tail wagging, and in the middle of the dream, Emily realized something important. It wasn't a memory. It was a vision. Not what was lost, but what was possible. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Noah woke first. He sat up quietly, rubbing his eyes, then looked toward the window where soft morning light filtered through the blinds. Emily opened her eyes and gave him a sleepy smile. "Still feel ready?" she asked. He nodded. They dressed slowly, choosing each item of clothing like it held symbolic meaning. The green hoodie. The clean sneakers. The notebook, carefully zipped into his backpack. Max followed them to the door but didn't fuss when he wasn't invited along. He simply sat, tail sweeping once across the floor, watching them leave. In the car, Noah hummed softly to himself, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Emily reached over and gave his knee a gentle squeeze. "If at any point you want to stop, just say so. You're not there to perform. You're just there to be yourself." "I know," he said. "That's all I'm planning to be." As they pulled into the courthouse parking lot, Emily spotted Jason already waiting near the entrance. He looked surprisingly relaxed, dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt, holding a cup of coffee in one hand. He walked toward them as they stepped out of the car. "Hey, buddy," he said, crouching to Noah's level. "You look ready for anything." Noah smiled. "I've got my drawings." Jason grinned. "Then they're lucky to have you." Emily watched the exchange quietly, appreciating the simplicity of it. There was no tension, no anxiety, just two parents standing beside a boy who had grown in ways neither of them had expected. They entered the courthouse together, walking through the lobby with a kind of silent solidarity. Karen met them near the security checkpoint, offering a brief nod and a reassuring smile to Noah. "Ready?" she asked him. "I think so," he replied. They moved toward the waiting area where families gathered before hearings, some tense, some hushed, others visibly emotional. Emily glanced at Jason. "No matter what happens today, I think we've already done the most important part." Jason nodded. "We listened to him." And with that, the morning unfolded, quietly, carefully, and with the kind of deliberate compassion that comes when adults step back just enough to let a child be heard. The courtroom was colder than it looked. Emily noticed it first through the way Noah instinctively pulled his hoodie sleeves down past his wrists as they entered, his small hands retreating into the fabric. The high ceilings and clean lines gave the space a sterile quiet, the kind that made every footstep echo just slightly. Jason walked beside them, expression neutral but composed. Karen greeted them at the entrance of the assigned courtroom, holding a manila folder and a calm, steady presence that instantly settled some of Emily's nerves. Noah glanced around the room, eyes tracing the wood-paneled walls, the rows of empty benches, the high judge's seat with its seal mounted above. He leaned slightly toward his mother. "It looks like a school auditorium," he whispered, "but without the stage lights." Emily smiled faintly and squeezed his hand. "Or the applause." They took their seats on the left side of the room. Jason and his lawyer sat a few rows behind. The judge had not yet arrived. Noah kept his drawing folder balanced on his lap, occasionally flipping it open just to make sure everything was still there. Emily could see the care he had taken. Each corner of the pages was sharp, each sketch centered and smoothed out like he had practiced handling them for days. He was prepared in a way that both impressed her and made her heart ache. This wasn't the kind of moment a child should have to prepare for. And yet, here he was, doing it without a hint of complaint. The bailiff stepped into the room and asked for attention. "All rise." The courtroom rose in unison as Judge Riley entered, the same firm yet kind woman who had spoken to Noah during their previous appearance. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and offered a brief, warm look toward the family seated in front of her. "We are here to finalize the custodial arrangement of the minor, Noah Carter, between the parents, Emily Carter and Jason Carter. Based on our previous session and the interviews conducted, we will proceed with formalizing the agreement presented." Emily listened as Karen rose and delivered a concise summary of the plan: shared legal custody, with Noah residing with Emily during the weekdays and spending alternating weekends and holidays with Jason. Max, their family dog, would follow a parallel schedule, easing transitions and maintaining emotional consistency for the child. Jason's attorney stood next and confirmed agreement. There was no objection, no friction, just a sense of mutual clarity that had taken months to build. The judge nodded slowly. "I've reviewed the materials submitted and conducted a private interview with the child. His emotional awareness and understanding of the situation are well beyond his years. That speaks volumes about the environment both of you have created." She paused, then turned her gaze to Noah. "Noah, I know we've spoken before. But if you feel comfortable, I'd like to ask you one or two questions here, just so the record reflects your voice." Noah looked at Emily. She gave a small nod. He rose, clutching his notebook, and walked to the front of the courtroom with cautious confidence. The clerk guided him to a small chair near the judge's bench. The judge leaned slightly forward, softening her tone. "Noah, do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes," he answered clearly. "You're helping us decide where I live and how Max can come with me." And how do you feel about the plan your parents have put together? He opened his notebook and held up the drawing of the two bookshelves. It works. I have space in both homes. Max has space too. We share him. Judge Riley smiled. And how do you feel when you go back and forth between homes? He thought for a second. At first, I felt like a backpack. Like I was just being carried around. But now, I feel more like I'm visiting places I belong to. There was a stillness in the room. Even the court clerk paused in typing. Judge Riley nodded solemnly. That's a powerful way to describe it, Noah. Thank you for sharing. Noah returned to his seat beside Emily. She reached for his hand again, this time more for herself than for him. He squeezed it gently and whispered, "It's almost over, right?" "Almost," she whispered back. The judge turned her attention back to the bench. "Unless either party has something further to add, I am prepared to sign the custodial agreement as presented." Jason stood unexpectedly. "Your Honor, just one thing." Emily turned slightly, uncertain. Jason looked toward Emily, then at the judge. "I'd like to formally request that Max's schedule be written into the court order, not just as a mutual understanding, but as a part of the custodial routine. For Noah's peace of mind." The judge raised her eyebrows slightly. "Is this agreeable to both parties?" Karen stood. "My client finds that acceptable, Your Honor." Emily nodded. The judge made a notation, then signed the papers. The final stamp echoed gently through the quiet room. This court recognizes the custodial agreement as legally binding, effective immediately. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, for handling this matter with civility and care. And thank you, Noah, for reminding us what these decisions are truly about. With that, the hearing concluded. The courtroom gradually emptied, the formality fading into the hum of post-proceeding chatter in the hallway. Outside, the sun had broken through the gray clouds, casting a soft light on the courthouse steps. They stepped into the sunlight together, Noah holding Emily's hand, Jason walking just ahead. Max wasn't there, but it felt as if his presence lingered in every step they took forward. Jason turned once they reached the sidewalk. "I've got Noah this weekend, right?" Emily smiled. "Yes. And Max is packed. He's got a fresh tennis ball too." Jason chuckled. "You're spoiling him. He deserves it." Noah looked up. "Can we take the drawings to both houses? 1 week with Mom, 1 week with Dad?" Emily nodded. "They'll travel just like Max does." Jason looked between them and smiled. "One of those drawings should go on the fridge." Emily agreed. "Or both. Side by side." For the first time in weeks, there was no awkwardness, no tentative silence, just a shared understanding that they had made it through. Not by accident. Not by avoiding conflict. But by choosing, again and again, to listen. To put Noah first. To let the shape of their family change without letting its heart fracture. As Jason and Noah walked toward his car, Emily stood for a moment longer at the steps, watching them. Noah turned to wave. She waved back. And in that moment, she realized something deeper than relief. It wasn't just over. It was beginning. The next chapter, not of survival, but of stability, trust, and the everyday act of choosing peace. The morning of the hearing began with muted light filtering through the courthouse windows, casting a neutral glow over the polished wooden panels. Emily had assumed the emotional weight of the day would have already fallen, or at least settled, but it hadn't. Instead, it felt suspended, waiting. When she and Jason finally reached the courtroom, she noticed a man in a business suit quietly taking a seat at the back, someone neither of them recognized. The proceeding went as expected at first: preliminary statements, confirmation of the parenting schedule, respectful acknowledgments from Judge Riley. The atmosphere was steady, balanced. Emily exhaled when the judge affirmed the shared custody arrangement and added Max's schedule formally into the record. It felt like homecoming, an affirmation of all the careful groundwork they had laid. Then, just as they believed it was concluded, the judge asked, "Any further matters?" Before either parent could speak, the man in the suit stood and walked to the front. With deliberate calm, he addressed the court. "Your Honor, my name is Dr. Adrian Mills. I'm the child psychologist assigned by the court last week. I was asked to conduct an evaluation of Noah's emotional responses to the current arrangement." Emily and Jason exchanged startled glances. Neither had heard of such an evaluation. They had not objected, they had simply been following the agreement and preparing with care. The judge turned her attention to Dr. Mills. "Thank you for joining us. Please present your assessment." Emily gripped the bench edge. She worried that any unexpected step might unravel the trust they had built. Dr. Mills cleared his throat. "I conducted a brief, non-intrusive series of sessions with Noah, drawing, game-based tasks, and informal conversation. The goal was to assess his emotional equilibrium and ability to adapt to the shared arrangement. I found, to my professional satisfaction, that Noah exhibits strong emotional resilience, displays no markers of anxiety significant enough to raise concern, and shows an impressive capacity to articulate his experience." He paused, looking down at the file he carried. "In fact, I was prepared to submit this as evidence of his stability. However, during the evaluation, I felt it was more appropriate to speak in person. I have written notes, but I prefer, with the court's permission, to summarize verbally." Judge Riley nodded. "Proceed." Dr. Mills nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Noah describes his life as visiting places he belongs to. He drew a balance scale. I interpreted it not as a child weighing options between parents, but as someone striving for emotional fairness. His drawings reflect consistency, not confusion. Though transitions are emotionally demanding, I found no evidence of psychological distress. He views the arrangement not as a loss but as a structure that respects all parts of his world." Emily felt tears stir in her eyes, not of despair, but gratitude. Jason's hand found hers briefly. They held on to one another as Dr. Mills continued. "There was one moment," he added quietly, "where Noah paused and asked, 'Will the judge remind me I'm strong enough to hold both parts?' That insight, at his age, is extraordinary." The courtroom held a collective breath. The judge nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Dr. Mills. That testimony is helpful." Jason rose next. "Your Honor, on behalf of both of us, Emily and I, thank you for allowing that. I hadn't known this evaluation was arranged, but I'm glad the court took that step." The judge inclined her head. "Our duty is not just to examine documents, but to ensure the child's emotional best interests are upheld. Dr. Mills's observations reinforce what we have already seen. This arrangement serves those interests." Emily exhaled, relief spreading through her like sunlight through frost. The unexpected evaluation, rather than undermining the process, had affirmed their decisions and Noah's well-being in a deeply meaningful way. Later, as they exited the courthouse, the afternoon sun warmed their faces. Dr. Mills followed briefly. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter," he said gently. "You're doing well, for the child's sake. It may not always be this steady, but he's demonstrably supported. You've done something right." Emily nodded, her gratitude silent but profound. At home that evening, Noah bounded through the front door, notebook in hand. Max trotted ahead, excited. Noah showed Emily his drawings, shelves now etched with subtle changes, a line of nightlight glow, a tiny heart beside each shelf, and on the connecting beam between them, two small, steady hands drawn together. "These are both home," he said simply. Emily knelt and hugged him. "Yes, sweetheart. They are." And in that moment, she realized how beautifully unexpected goodness could weave itself through even the most formal chambers. The real surprise wasn't a disruption, it was confirmation of something she almost forgot was possible, a family held together by listening, by respect, and by a child's quiet wisdom. The air that Saturday morning felt different, lighter somehow. Not because the complexities of co-parenting had vanished or because every uncertainty had been resolved, but because something about the rhythm of their days had begun to feel real again. Not borrowed or temporary or rehearsed, but lived in. Genuine. And as Emily moved through the house that morning, she noticed it in the smallest ways. Noah's room, once a quiet space of careful adjustment, now hummed with routine. His backpack hung from the same hook he'd chosen, his schedule pinned on the corkboard he had insisted on organizing himself. Drawings from both houses were placed side by side, no longer treated like separate artifacts from competing worlds. They had become parts of a larger story, his story. In the kitchen, Max lay curled near the fridge, tail twitching as he dozed. Emily poured herself coffee and watched the early sunlight spill across the floor. It had been 2 weeks since the final hearing, and in that time, life hadn't just continued, it had taken root in new patterns. Noah came downstairs quietly, rubbing his eyes and dragging his blanket behind him like he had when he was much younger. Emily smiled and opened her arms. He walked into her hug without a word, leaning into her warmth for a moment longer than usual. "I didn't hear you wake up," she said gently. "I woke up before Max," he murmured. "He's not very good at mornings." Emily chuckled softly. "Neither am I, if we're being honest." They sat together at the table, eating toast and scrambled eggs. The quiet between them wasn't heavy, it was comfortable. Familiar. "I was thinking," Noah said, after finishing his last bite. "Maybe we could build something in the backyard." Emily tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like a place for me and Max. Not a big thing, just something that's only ours." She smiled. "A secret fort?" "No. A not secret one. But not boring either." That afternoon, they went to the local hardware store. Noah picked out wooden panels and a roll of waterproof fabric, while Emily browsed for paint colors. He chose 2 shades, a soft green and a deep navy blue, declaring them Max colors. As they walked out of the store, arms full of materials, Emily spotted Jason's car pulling into the lot. He stepped out, spotted them, and walked over, hands in his pockets. "Fort project?" he asked. "Not secret but not boring space," Emily replied, smiling. Noah held up the fabric. "It's for Max too." Jason knelt beside him. "Need a hand?" Emily looked at her son. "What do you think?" Noah shrugged, a smile forming. "Only if you follow instructions." Jason laughed. "Fair enough." That afternoon, the 3 of them worked side by side in the backyard. Max wandered around the build site, occasionally chasing leaves or barking at a passing squirrel. They marked out the area under the large tree by the back fence, Noah's choice, and began assembling the wooden frame. Emily held the panel steady while Jason secured the joints. Noah painted small sections at a time, switching between green and blue with determined focus. There was no script for the way the day unfolded. No scheduled visitation, no mandated time blocks, just natural coexistence. When the structure began to take shape, Noah stepped back and inspected it carefully. "It needs a name," he declared. "Everywhere important has a name." Emily looked at Jason. "Suggestions?" Jason rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "How about the middle?" Noah frowned. "Why?" "Because it's not mine, not Mom's. It's yours. And Max's. It's where both parts meet." Noah considered that, then nodded. "Okay. The middle. That works." As evening settled in, they strung up a small set of solar lights around the frame, creating a soft, warm glow beneath the tree. Max lay inside the half-finished space, tail thumping gently as if approving the design. Jason eventually stood and dusted off his hands. "I should head out," he said. "Thanks for letting me crash the project." Emily smiled. "It wouldn't have been the same without you." Noah hugged his dad without prompting. "Next weekend, we can build the inside part." Jason nodded. "I'll be there." After he left, Emily and Noah sat inside, the middle, watching Max stretch across the painted wooden floor. Fireflies blinked softly in the grass beyond the frame. Noah rested his head on her shoulder. "Is this what new beginnings feel like?" he asked quietly. Emily looked around, the structure, the dog, the quiet that no longer felt like silence. "Maybe," she replied. "Or maybe it's just life, finally catching up to us." That night, back inside, she watched as Noah climbed into bed, Max curling beside him as usual. On his nightstand, 2 drawings rested under the lamp, one from Jason's, one from her home. Together, not labeled or divided. She turned out the light and whispered, "Good night." And as she stepped into the hallway, she realized she no longer felt the weight of what had been. Only the shape of what was, and what could still grow. 3 months had passed since the finalization of the custody agreement, and Emily had stopped counting the days. Not because they had ceased to matter, but because the routine had finally settled into something that no longer felt temporary. Each week now held a familiar rhythm, weekdays full of school pickups, dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend transitions that unfolded with quiet ease. There were no last-minute calls of confusion, no tense conversations about who was picking up who or where Max was supposed to sleep. There were calendars on the fridge, reminders on the phone, and most importantly, trust that each parent would do what they promised. It was late January, and the snow outside had been falling gently since morning. The neighborhood lay under a soft white blanket, the streets quiet except for the occasional crunch of tires over packed ice. Inside the house, warmth hummed steadily from the radiators. Noah was at the kitchen table working on a science project, colored paper and glue sticks scattered across the surface. Max lay under the table, occasionally sniffing at dropped scraps of paper or licking at bits of glitter that had settled near his paws. Emily sipped her tea at the counter, watching Noah carefully construct a model of the solar system. He had insisted on adding Pluto, despite his teacher's note that it was no longer officially a planet. "It matters to me," he said with a shrug. "Pluto still belongs." She hadn't argued. In fact, the sentiment had stayed with her all day. Jason had picked Noah up the previous weekend, as scheduled, and they'd returned Sunday evening with photos of their hike through Red Rocks Canyon, Max bounding through the snow like a puppy. Noah had returned full of stories, face pink from the cold and cheeks warm from excitement. He hadn't once mentioned anything about the separation. It was no longer the central conversation of their lives. It had become, simply, part of their family's design. That afternoon, Emily received an email from Noah's teacher, Ms. Dunley. "Hi Emily. Just wanted to say how impressed I've been with Noah's focus and confidence lately. He's asking more questions in class, showing more initiative. I know things have been changing at home, but whatever you're doing, it's working. Warmly. L. Dunley." Emily smiled as she read it. She forwarded the message to Jason without comment, and a few minutes later, his reply came. "Thanks for sharing. That made my day." The message was short, but sincere. It was enough. Later that week, Emily and Noah stood in the kitchen preparing his lunch for school. He insisted on making his own sandwich, turkey, cheddar, and exactly 3 slices of cucumber. Emily supervised, cutting apples while Max watched with great interest from his usual post near the pantry. "Are you coming to the science fair next week?" Noah asked. "Of course," she said. "Wouldn't miss it. Dad's coming too," he added casually. Emily nodded. "Good. He'll love seeing your model." Noah smiled. "Maybe we can all get hot chocolate after." The idea surprised her at first, not because it was impossible, but because it no longer felt unusual. The thought of sitting with Jason and Noah, just the 3 of them at a cafe, no longer stirred discomfort. It felt manageable. Even welcome. That weekend, Jason dropped Noah off a little early, Max bounding ahead with a chew toy in his mouth. Emily opened the door and laughed as Max leapt into the foyer like a whirlwind. "He brought that from my house," Jason said, stepping inside. "Apparently it's his travel companion now." Noah stepped in behind him, brushing snow from his jacket. "It's for both places." Emily looked down at the slobbery, worn toy. "Well, he seems to think it's diplomatic." They shared a brief moment of amusement before Jason handed Emily a folder. "His school report came early. Figured you should see it." Emily flipped through it quickly, glowing remarks in every subject, especially art and science. Her chest swelled with quiet pride. "Thank you," she said. Jason paused. "You're doing a great job with him." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "So are you." They didn't linger in the moment, didn't turn it into a longer conversation. But it was a step, a subtle shift in their shared language. The following Wednesday, the science fair filled the school gymnasium with cardboard displays, vinegar volcanoes, and tangled extension cords. Emily arrived first, helping Noah set up his project on a folding table. His model solar system was bright, clean, labeled meticulously. He had added tiny cutouts of Max floating among the planets. Jason arrived 15 minutes later, carrying 2 travel mugs of cocoa. He handed one to Emily without fanfare, and she accepted it with a grateful smile. Noah beamed as his teacher approached. "This is my mom and dad." Ms. Dunley greeted them both warmly, then leaned into Noah. "Your model is one of my favorites." After she moved on, Emily noticed Jason staring at the model a bit longer than necessary. "You added Max?" Noah nodded. "He goes everywhere. Even to space." Jason chuckled. "That sounds about right." After the fair, the 3 of them did go for hot chocolate. They sat at a corner table near the window, steam rising from their cups, Max curled under the bench by Noah's feet. The conversation was light, about school, movies, Max's snow antics. There were no discussions about parenting schedules, no awkward silences. It was, simply, easy. When they returned home, Jason lingered at the doorway as Noah took Max upstairs. "I've been thinking," he said. "We could do something like this once a month. Just the 3 of us. No expectations. Just consistency." Emily nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Jason hesitated. "For Noah. But maybe for us too." She didn't disagree. She only said, "Let's see how it goes." As the door closed behind him, Emily stood in the quiet house, a sense of continuity settling around her. Not permanence, because life rarely offered that, but a kind of peace built on mutual effort, on showing up when it mattered, on knowing that not everything had to be a battle. Upstairs, Noah was laughing, really laughing, as Max leapt onto his bed and knocked over a pillow. Emily smiled as she walked up the stairs, the sound wrapping around her like a promise. Stability wasn't the absence of change. It was finding balance in the middle of it. Spring arrived slowly that year, but when it came, it transformed the neighborhood. The snow melted into puddles that shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the once barren trees began to bloom with soft green buds. The backyard, which had spent much of winter under a thick blanket of frost, now stretched open again, revealing the small structure Noah had built with his parents. The middle, as he had named it, stood firm, its painted boards weathered slightly by snow but still vibrant beneath the fresh light. Emily stood on the back porch one Saturday morning, a cup of coffee warming her hands, as she watched Noah and Max tumble together on the grass. Jason arrived a few minutes later, as expected. There was no knock at the front door, no text to announce his arrival, just the sound of his car door closing and his footsteps on the wooden deck. "Hey," he said as he stepped beside her. "Morning," she replied. They both watched in silence as Noah shouted something unintelligible to Max, who responded by launching into a clumsy sprint, crashing joyfully into his owner. Jason sipped the coffee Emily had poured for him, the silence between them easy now. Not the kind born of things left unsaid, but the kind that comes when everything has already been talked through and understood. "Noah wants to build shelves in the middle," Emily said after a while. "For his drawings." Jason nodded. "He told me. Asked if I could bring a small desk chair next weekend." "You should. I think he wants to start using it for homework sometimes." Jason smiled. "Figures. Give the kid a clubhouse, he turns it into a study." They shared a quiet laugh. Then Jason glanced at her, his tone more thoughtful. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Emily took a long breath, looking at the way Noah moved, the way Max followed, the way the air between all of them had settled into something unforced. "I hoped we would," she answered. "Even when it didn't seem possible." They spent the rest of the morning helping Noah paint the inside of the middle, freshening the color with new layers of green and blue. Jason brought the chair, just as promised, and Noah placed it carefully beneath the narrow window, beside the shelves they assembled together. Max lay sprawled across the doorway like a sentry on break. Later that afternoon, after Jason left, Emily and Noah sat in the fort, admiring their work. He had brought out his drawing notebook and was flipping through it slowly. "Do you think this is the last drawing?" he asked, holding up a blank page. Emily shook her head. "I think it's just the next one." He nodded and began sketching. This time, he drew something new, something without lines dividing spaces, without scales or halves. He drew a long winding path through trees, with Max walking slightly ahead, his tail wagging. Behind him, a small figure followed, notebook in hand, walking not between two homes, but through something that stretched beyond them. When he was done, he showed it to her. "This is how it feels now," he said. "Not back and forth. Just forward." She hugged him, letting his words settle like a blessing. That evening, they went to the park. It was the same one they had visited months before, when things had felt more fragile. But now, the air held laughter instead of questions. Jason met them there with a new collar for Max, one with both addresses engraved on the tag, and Noah's name in larger letters than before. Noah read it aloud. "This way, if Max ever gets lost, people know he belongs in both places." Jason knelt beside him. "Exactly." They stayed until sunset, playing catch, walking the trails, letting Max roam freely. At one point, Emily took a photo of the three of them, Noah in the middle, Max sitting between his legs, Jason and Emily on either side. It wasn't a portrait of a traditional family, but it was whole in its own way. When they finally returned home, Emily tucked Noah into bed. He was already drifting off, his voice soft and slow. "Thanks for letting everything be how it is," he murmured. She kissed his forehead. "Thanks for showing us how it could be." Downstairs, Max curled into his usual spot near the door. The house was quiet. Emily sat on the couch for a moment, staring at the framed drawing Noah had finally let her hang, the middle, surrounded by trees, shelves full of stories, and Max always in the center. It was never about division, she realized. It had always been about expansion, about making room for change, for understanding, for kindness that endured beyond separation. Outside, the wind rustled through new leaves. A chapter had closed, yes, but not with finality. With openness. With light. With truth. And in that, Emily found not just an ending, but everything a new beginning needed.